Staves 1, 2 and 3 of Charles Dickens's novella A Christmas Carol. I've already analysed how Ebenezer Scrooge is presented in them. So now I guess it makes sense for me to analyse his presentation in Stave 4. So just how is Scrooge presented in Stave 4 of A Christmas Carol? Let's find out. What's occurring, Revision Squad? It's me, Liam, aka Mr. Knight, aka DystopiaJunkie, and I'm back again with another revision video about A Christmas Carol. In this one, we're going to carry on thinking about the character of Ebenezer Scrooge, and in particular, how he is presented in Stave 4. As I've mentioned elsewhere, I've decided to break down my analysis of him by stave, so that we can think about more quotations in more detail, which I hope will benefit your understanding of Scrooge and therefore boost your grades. As ever, I strongly recommend that you make sure you've got a pen and some paper to hand so that you may make notes of the things that I discuss over the course of this video. And if you do find this to be helpful, please do consider showing your support by liking, commenting, subscribing and sharing, all of that lovely stuff. I really do appreciate it. Okay, so I think that it is always worth having a quick think about who Scrooge is. There are different approaches you can take whilst doing this. You can think of him as a character, so, a made-up person. You can think of his role within the story, or you can think of him as a symbol, metaphor, or representation of something or someone else. Now, the ideas that are on screen at the moment are ideas that I have already explained in quite a bit of detail in my analysis of Scrooge in Stave 1. Rather than repeat myself time and time again, I recommend that you check that video out after you've watched this one, if, of course, you haven't already done so. Now, I know the real reason why you clicked on this video is because you're after some quotations, right? So get ready, because here they come. Before we get properly started, just a quick reminder that all the page numbers I reference in this series relates to this copy of the book. And so the page numbers might be different if you're using a different edition of the story. But hopefully I still make it pretty clear whereabouts in the stave each quotation comes from. So the first few quotations I want to think about occur right at the start of Stave 4, when Scrooge meets the ghost of Christmas yet to come. For instance, Scrooge feared the silent shape so much that his legs trembled beneath him. Now, this quotation includes the word feared, which makes it pretty clear that Scrooge is afraid of this particular spirit. Now, analysing that verb is all well and good, but I don't think it lends itself to particularly deep or insightful analysis. For instance, you might write, the verb feared shows that Scrooge is scared because he fears the spirit. And let's be honest, that isn't particularly interesting because it's quite repetitive and doesn't really go anywhere. Instead, let's think about the verb trembled from later on in the quotation. It reveals to us the true extent of Scrooge's fear because it explains that Scrooge is so overwhelmed that he cannot prevent his body from displaying his emotions. His fear is not just something conscious, but subconscious too. Now, where else do we see Scrooge's fear in the opening of Stave 4? Well, it is also made pretty explicit in his dialogue. Again, because the quotation actually includes the word fear, I probably wouldn't focus on that word, and instead I might think about the determiner more. Scrooge's fear of this spirit is greater than the fear he felt towards the others. But why? Is it because of this spirit's appearance, because it will show him the future, or is it because of the cumulative effect of the previous ghosts, or something else altogether? I'll leave that for you to decide. Furthermore, why not think about the amount of questions Scrooge asks when he first meets the spirit? Usually, asking questions might show conversational dominance and power, But I don't think that's the case here, because the spirit ignores Scrooge. Instead, I think Scrooge's frequent questions show a degree of uncertainty and anxiety, and so perhaps they could also present him as being fearful. So I think it's pretty clear then that Scrooge is pretty scared at the start of Stave 4. How is he presented later? When the spirit shows to Scrooge business people discussing somebody's death, somebody who we know is in fact Scrooge, we could say that Scrooge is presented as being unloved. You see, one business person comments, "It is likely to be a very cheap funeral, for upon my life, I don't know of anybody to go to it." The fact that Scrooge's funeral will be very cheap compares nicely with Marley's at the beginning of the story. Marley's funeral was cheap because Scrooge was tight with his money, perhaps suggesting that somebody who should have shown some care did not. This financial stinginess is probably less of a factor in the organisation of Scrooge's funeral. I would assume Fred would probably be in charge of this, being Scrooge's closest relative, and he does not seem to share his uncle's stinginess. No, Scrooge's funeral would be cheap because, as postulated here by the business person, nobody would really care to go, and so there will be next to nobody to provide for at the event. This idea is echoed in later quotations. For instance, when another business person suggests that they would go to Scrooge's funeral if lunch is provided, the conjunction "if" makes it clear that they would only care about Scrooge if they got something out of it, in this case a lunch, in return. Their care is not genuine, merely transactional. I think Scrooge being unloved is perhaps most interestingly shown later on. First of all, in this exchange, Scrooge is called Old Scratch, which was a colloquial way, in the Victorian times at least, of referring to the devil, and so already we can see that Scrooge is being disrespected in death. Additionally, I find the second person's reaction to the news of Scrooge's death to be fascinating. They acknowledge that Scrooge is dead, and then, rather than mourn him, or even say anything that suggests that they're sad by this, they change the subject to an incredibly trivial topic: the weather. To me, this suggests that they also think the news of Scrooge's passing is trivial and unimportant, perhaps even more so than the weather, if they had rather talk about that. Next up, let's consider Scrooge's reaction to witnessing a dead person's belongings being stolen and sold off. We find out that Scrooge listened to this dialogue in horror. Now, all of this is relating to the exchange in Old Joe's shop. Because Scrooge listens in horror, I think it is clear that he is extremely shocked by what he has witnessed. But shocked by what exactly? His entire adult life revolved around the accumulation of wealth, even when this has been to the detriment of other people. So he can't be shocked by these people profiting off of a dead man's belongings, can he? Well, actually, I think he is. It appears that Scrooge is shocked by the unsympathetic and money-grabbing attitudes of the thieves. Scrooge has reached a point in his transformation where money is no longer his main priority, and where selfishness appeals less to him. He has changed and become much more sympathetic, more caring towards his fellow man, less obsessed with hoarding wealth. In short, by being shocked precisely by the attitude that he exhibited for so long, we can see just how much Scrooge has changed. Now, for this idea, I'm not going to discuss any additional quotations, because I think the one I've just gone through is simultaneously easy to remember, and it also provides you with an opportunity to do some really interesting analysis about Scrooge's character. So good luck. Our next batch of quotations comes shortly after the last one. After witnessing the thieves, Scrooge turns to the spirit. "Spirit," said Scrooge, shuddering from head to foot. I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now." You can probably already see which word I'm going to focus on in this quotation because I've underlined it, and that is the modal verb might. In this quotation, might acts more like could be, as Scrooge is saying that the fate of the dead person, disrespected, stolen from, and uncared for, could be his own, as he recognises that his life is currently following that trajectory. Now, on the one hand, this shows that Scrooge is aware that his past actions are likely to have negative consequences if he does not redeem himself. Fair enough. But what I think is even more interesting is that it shows Scrooge to be pretty oblivious or even naive, because in saying that the dead man who is stolen from, the same dead man who has been mentioned throughout the entire stave, might be himself, he is unable to see that the dead man actually is him. Even now, Scrooge does not completely believe that his past actions are completely deserving of this sort of treatment. He sees the spirit's vision of the future as a lesson, something that is at a distance from him, rather than a direct warning about his actual life, or should that be death. Now, Scrooge's obliviousness or naivety is visible elsewhere in Stave 4. You see, when Scrooge sees his house and asks to look in so that he may see himself, the spirit points away to what we know will eventually lead to a graveyard. Certainly, the spirit is pointing away from Scrooge's house to tell him that he does not live there anymore. Scrooge cannot understand this though. That much is apparent in the fact that he asks the spirit a question. He still hasn't quite clocked on to what is super obvious to us as readers. In this future, Scrooge is dead. Alright, so our final quotations come right at the end of Stave 4. Once Scrooge has realised that the dead person at the heart of this vision of the future is in fact himself. Scrooge says to the spirit, "I will honour Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me that I may sponge away the writing on this stone." What is clear is that Scrooge is adamant that he will change his ways. This is shown by the anaphora, "I will," as the modal verb will is used to express total certainty about whether or not something will happen. Scrooge is explicitly stating that he will change his attitude, remember the spirits, and learn from their lessons. The question is though, what has prompted this change? Because in this quotation, by asking the spirit if he may sponge away the writing on this stone and undo his lonely death, it is implied that Scrooge wants to change his ways so that people will care about him once he has died. Now, is that quite a selfish motivation? Regardless, Scrooge's will to change is also seen elsewhere in the text. By asking the spirit, "Are these the shadows of things that will be, or are they the shadows of things that may be only?" it is clear to us that Scrooge is entertaining the idea that fate is not predetermined and that our actions in life can change the paths we eventually take. If he's asking this, then it suggests that he wants to change because he wants to avoid the future that he has been presented. Still, the question remains about whether or not Scrooge's motivation for changing is entirely selfish or not. Does he want to become a better man because treating others is the right thing to do? Or does he want to change out of self-preservation, change so that his life does not end in such an awful way? Or is it even more complex than that? is his selfishness caused by the fact that he now realises that he has missed out on so much in life, and so he wants to be more caring towards others so that they may care for him in death? Certainly, there is a degree of ambiguity here, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It renders possible some really fascinating analyses and discussions. What I'm trying to say is, don't get put off by this riddle. Unpick it in your writing and see how explorative your essays can become. I promise you, you'll surprise yourself. Okay, so that is us almost over. Just a quick summary and then an optional task for you to tackle. So don't close the video just yet. Now, if we were to summarise Scrooge in Stave 4, we might say something like, Stave 4 is unkind to Scrooge. He is scared and oblivious to the fact he is being shown the aftermath of his own death, including seeing how unloved he is once he has passed. Despite this, in being shocked by other people's unsympathetic attitudes, Scrooge is presented as being caring, and his willingness to change his ways suggests that he has, to an extent, learned from the three spirits. As I've said before, I always think it's useful to have a summary written down somewhere. It will help to jog your memory when you get round to revising, could act as a good introduction to your essay, and might also prompt several paragraphs if you think about those key words. So in this example, scared, oblivious, shocked, caring, and willing to change. Those might be some paragraphs that you end up writing. And here's that quick question for you. What do you think terrifies Scrooge the most in Stave 4? The ghost of Christmas yet to come? The inevitability of his death? The prospect that he might die before he can correct the errors of his ways? Or something else? Why? Do whatever you want with that question, even if it means ignoring it. Although, obviously, that means you won't get the most out of watching this video. You could create a mind map that explores each of these ideas. You could use it to prompt a debate with your classmates, or even on your own. And you could definitely use it to write a mini essay down in the comments section. I absolutely love seeing your ideas, and I think it is always interesting to see what your opinions are. So why not pause the video and give it a go? I'm usually pretty good at responding to comments too, so you'll even get some feedback from me. Right, so that is my analysis of Scrooge in Stave 4 of A Christmas Carol complete. I really do hope that this video has helped you out, whether that's because you're revising for exams, studying A Christmas Carol for the first time, or just have a passing interest in Charles Dickens's writing. If you found this video to be interesting or useful, please do show your support by liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing, and so on. I know it's cringy for me to say that, but it really does help me out so much more than you know, and it also helps me to help even more students, which is the aim of the game. Now, as ever, I hope that you have an awesome rest of the day. If you are revising, please do remember to take frequent short breaks. As a burned out student, it's not a happy or successful student, which is what I think you deserve to be. So in Stave 4 of A Christmas Carol, after seeing a vision of the future in which he is unloved, uncared for and, well, dead, Ebenezer Scrooge seems totally determined to change his ways. It seems that maybe the threat of this dark, gloomy and dismal future was the final straw in making him see the errors of his ways.